What's up YouTube? Welcome back to another video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Getting ready to leave today to go to Pickwick Lake. I can't wait to get on the road. Dropped my kid off this morning. Had to shoot this video real quick to make sure y'all get the content that y'all deserve on YouTube. Today's video is going to highlight the shad spawn. If you've watched any of the Elite Series event, if you've watched some of the Pro Circuit stuff, or even the MPFL stuff, the shad spawn is in full swing right now. And I want to explain to you a couple of baits that are my favorites when approaching the shad spawn. If you haven't yet though, drop down and hit that subscribe button real quick. I would love if y'all did that so I know kind of who's watching my videos and who's not. And make sure you like that video if you like it. And I appreciate that. And share it with your friends. So let's go ahead and dive right into this video and share a few of my favorite baits for fishing the shad spawn. The shad spawn can be one of the very best times to get out there and go fishing. The one thing about the shad spawn though is you need to get there super early in the morning. You know, sometimes if it's a cloudy day, the shad spawn will extend through the morning, you know, to 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in some situations. But most of the time, about the first 40 minutes to an hour is when you need to be approaching those fish. So one of the biggest clues I can give you guys is to get there early and get there often. You know, one of the biggest problems I had early on in my career is I could never find a shad spawn. I never even knew what it was. I couldn't find it. I couldn't see it. And a lot of times it was because I wasn't there early enough in the morning, and that was a big time problem for trying to find those bass. So that is probably one of the most important keys that I can tell you is be there extremely early every day that you're on the water. This time of year, when that water temp hits that high 60s to 70s, those shad are going to start spawning. They'll spawn on just about anything from rocks, docks, gravel bars. Depending on where you're at, it might be bushes, it might be laydowns. They could be spawning out in the middle of the lake. I mean, just on like shallow, anywhere that the water is somewhat shallow or something that's floating on top of the water is a great place for those shad to spawn. You know, I'm going to break down a couple of my favorite baits and kind of give you a situation as to when I throw them and how I throw them. The first one I'm going to talk about is a pretty simple one, and it is a swim bait. You know, a swim bait is a very easy bait to fish in the shad spawn. You can fish it a lot of different ways, and that's why I don't really have it rigged for you, because the cool thing about it, these paddle tail type swim baits, this happens to be a rage swimmer. I throw a lot of different ones though. I'm not going to tell you the exact ones I throw because I throw so many different ones. So you can rig them on jig heads, you can rig them on underspins, you can rig them on weighted hooks. I mean, it kind of depends on your situation. So I'll give you a couple of examples. If I'm fishing shallow flooded vegetation, I'm going to rig this thing weedless, sometimes with a blade and sometimes without. If I'm fishing a place where the shad are spawning really heavy and maybe I have some chop on the water, a little wind blowing in, I want the blade on there, no questions asked. If I'm in a situation where it's dead calm and the shad are spawning, I might just throw the rage swimmer with a weighted hook, a belly weighted hook with no blade, and that's where I'm going to catch my bass. So you kind of have to play the situation. If they're around docks, I love throwing this on a ball head and just reeling it real slow around those docks. It's a great shad imitating bait. Probably one of the easiest and best when you're going out there on the water. And like I said, the most important aspect of shad spawn is throwing shad color bait. So you want something that's either white on cloudy days or maybe a little bit more transparent like this one. This is a Pro Blue Red Pearl. One of my other favorites is a very old staple, and that's just a spinnerbait. A spinnerbait is probably one of, if not the most versatile bait on the market. I mean, you can fish it from top to bottom. You can throw extremely small, light ones that are like 1/8 ounce and tiny, all the way to giant spinnerbaits. I mean, I'm talking ounce, ounce and a half, 2 ounce spinnerbaits. So there's a lot of possibilities with spinnerbait. In the shad spawn, I feel like there's about 2 sizes you need to have. You need to have a 1/2 ounce and a 3/4 ounce. The 1/2 ounce is going to help you around situations around docks, laydowns, bushes, flooded vegetation, things like that. It's a great, great way to catch them. But now if you go on gravel bars, and I'm talking about like Tennessee River type places, and those shad are spawning maybe in 6 to 8 foot of water, the 1/2 ounce isn't going to get the job done. That's when you need to go to the 3/4 ounce spinnerbait. Once again, when it comes to color, I try to keep it extremely basic. I throw white chartreuse, maybe a transparent, like a chartreuse shad. In this situation, this is a green gizzard, and it just happens to be one of my favorite colors that I throw. But, I mean, really and truly, guys, the most important thing you do is just get there early and throw a shad color bait, and you'll be surprised what you catch. So we've talked about the swim bait. We talked about the spinner bait. Another one of my favorites, I would say probably the one I turn to the most, and I'll explain to you why. And I'm going to have some people that tell me I'm wrong, and you know what? I might be. But probably the number one bait that I throw all the time is a thunder cricket. You know, I vary the size depending on the situation. Once again, like the swim bait, like the spinner bait, depends on the depth of water the shad are spawning in, from around docks or rocks or whatever. I really like a 3/8 to half. White chartreuse, once again, the blade minnow goes really well with it. A fluke style bait. It kind of depends a lot on the size of your shad too. That's something to really pay attention to when you're out there on the water. But the cool thing about, you know, I have a lot of guys ask me, like, well, why don't you throw a swim jig? A swim jig is so great. And guys, I've fished a swim jig for years and years, and I still throw a swim jig a lot. I really do. But I have lost a ton of fish on a swim jig. Like, over the years, especially in the shad spawn, those fish are so vicious, and they go up there and slap at your bait so hard. If you have a weed guard on your swim jig, you're taking a risk on losing them. But the problem is, if you cut that weed guard off or maybe shave it down to where it's only a few strands, you're going to take the chance of literally hanging up every time you make a cast, especially in shallow vegetation or in some situations around docks or something like that. I mean, you're really taking a big risk. I just like the hookup ratio on a vibrating jig. I don't care if it's a jackhammer, a chatterbait, or a thunder cricket, or whatever one you throw. The hookup ratio is always a lot better on a vibrating jig. And so I tend to turn to that. I really like the vibrating jig around rocks. It's just a really versatile bait. You can cover a lot of water with it. And I don't think there's a wrong way to fish it. So just a really good alternative on the shad spawn. Obviously, one that has been kicking butt as of late. I mean, look at what Patrick Walters is doing on Lake Fork. Literally today, again, caught another 8-pounder. Is throwing a jerkbait. I mean, he's fishing shad spawn, shad eating fish, and there's really not a better bait right now than throwing a jerkbait. You know, there's a bunch of different ones out there. They're all good. And I actually did a video the other day of a couple things that I like to do with jerkbaits and size line. I hope you go check that video out. But when it comes to shad tournaments, especially when you're talking jerking and throwing a jerkbait, I like the, you know, depending on where I'm at, I like a couple different colors. I like chartreuse shad, like this one is here. It's more transparent, has a blue tint to it, especially on Tennessee River lakes. That bluish tint really kind of gets it done. You can throw solid white in certain situations if the water might be dirty. And if you're on a lake that is extremely clear, something like a Pro Blue is fantastic. But a jerkbait definitely gets the call on shad spawn. I mean, no questions asked. It is probably, if not the hottest lure right now, and probably the most sought after lure right now of any bait on the market. And last but not least is absolutely become one of my favorite ways to catch them. Thank you, Todd Castledine. But definitely one of my favorite ways to catch them, and that's throwing a popping perch. There's a lot of frogs out there, and most of them will work. They'll get the job done. They'll get you bites. You'll catch bass on them. I just like the popping perch. It has that profile, that shad type profile, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. But when you take this thing out, you know, you actually, if you look at it, it actually has a cutout tail, so it looks like a big shad on top of the water. You can't do it all. You can't fish it everywhere, and it's not a thing. I can't throw it over ledges on Kentucky Lake. I can't, you know, there's a lot of situations where it's not going to be effective. But if the shad are spawning in the grass, and I'm talking about shallow, maybe pepper grass, hay grass, hydrilla, whatever it is, floating vegetation, around bushes, laydowns, you know, when that water starts to warm up, probably first week in May, mid-May, this thing right here is just about hard to beat. You know when the shad are spawning, though. And a great way to know is when you throw your spinnerbait out there and you're reeling it, and they'll actually hit your blade. You're thinking you're having a bite every cast, and it's like bang, 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 bang. And they're constantly hitting your blade, but it's actually the shad trying to spawn on your blades. It's pretty crazy when you find that. and then you can kind of adjust your baits accordingly. But yeah, the popping perch, this is the color I throw. It's White Shadow. It's the one I throw all the time. He definitely, like, I'm going to tell you right now, guys, I was super skeptical about this bait. I want to give it a chance. I thought it was goofy looking. There was a lot of things about it that I was like, cosmetically, there were some things I would have done differently. But I'm just telling you guys, this thing is absolutely nasty. He took me out on probably the most pressured lake in Texas, Sam Rayburn, and said, hey, I'm going to show you something. And he took me out there, and we straight up smashed them. It was probably the most fun I've had in a boat in a long time. So, yeah, that's definitely number 5. But, you know, there's a lot of other great baits out there. There's glide baits. There's square bill crankbaits. There's Deepwood Winds. There's 3XDs. There's so many different baits that you can throw. Maybe keep your options open. Keep that open mind when you're out there on the shad spawn. There's always a bait that they're going to eat best. So if you get on one of those epic shad spawns, all I can say is I implore you to go out there and keep your mind open. Keep your possibilities open. Have a bunch of different baits tied on. Don't get stuck in the same bait every time, because one day you're going to go out there and pick a new bait up. And you're going to be like, oh my gosh, why haven't I been throwing this the whole time? And that's exactly what you should do. So I hope you like this video. It's really keying in on the shad spawn. That's what's happening right now. And I hope this helps you catch more bass the next time you hit the water. And hopefully you're there early enough to capitalize on that shad spawn.